Hey there, Golden Bears. I hope you're keeping it classy like I know you always do and will. We are here about to discuss the Vietnam War and what the implications of that might mean. And so with that, let me jump into a story like I always typically like to do and kind of convey something of significance to this. My story begins in 2005 when my wife and I and family decided to uproot in Temecula and move south to Mexico. And boy, we were incredibly blessed by so many different people who came alongside and helped us sell our home and sell our furniture and trim down what we had. And then at the same time of selling, people gave us like trailers and like this brand, like almost brand new, big F-350 like quad cab. It was immense, this truck. And they go, "Oh, you're moving to Mexico, you got to have a big truck." And I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And it would be good to help pull people out of the mud and do other things if I needed to do that. And sure enough, we didn't know really where we were moving at the time. We ended up in this small little rural town of 1,200 people. And it was there as I got to know some of the people there at the church or in the town that we learned that since there was only one, in fact, when we moved there were no paved roads, none. And so every time it rained, man, everybody went on lockdown and didn't travel. Even after it stopped raining, it would take 2 or 3 days for the mud to clear because there's no point in going out, because if your car slips off the road, you're stranded there, and who has money to, go rent a backhoe and all those other types of things. And so there was one particular time, about 3 years we were into it, and it was, 2008, 2009, and it was just dumping for like 3 days in a row. And one of my buddies, Carlos, had a 40 acres up outside of town that he had donated 5 of those acres to a men's rehab center. And I was doing stuff with him and really became close friends. And it was famous that anytime you go out to his property there on this dirt road, there were sections that you could not trust. And even the local guy, his dad who owned the land originally and then gave it to Carlos, they knew where you can go in the dry seasons, but for sure in the wet seasons, do not set foot or else you will be trapped. And what was the issue? Quicksand. And so after the third day of raining, they were out there. They were in this old clunker Suburban. And the Suburban, the guys who were driving it without Carlos didn't know the way of the road. They went off, it looked like it's the normal road we take, but boy, you slip off 6 inches this way, and your truck the vehicle just slips right down to where it's on the running boards, and it just keeps sinking and gurgling and sinking and gurgling, and it's crazy. And so there have been a few times that he would call me, "Hey Doug, can you come out there with the big truck?" And we would let the air out of the tire, and we'd hook up the toe straps, and then most of the time the truck could do its job. Well, on one such occasion, literally, I'm leaving the next day for a month-long trip with our students and the people that we're doing program with down there. And I'm in the last-minute Charlie mode, and I get a call from Carlos. "Hey Doug, we got another vehicle stuck out there at the ranch. Can you come help?" I'm like, "Oh, Carlos, I'm leaving tonight at like 1 a.m. He goes, "I know, but I got you. I'll be there." And this is maybe 8 o'clock. So I get out there, and Carlos and I are driving, and he says, and as he begins to talk, he goes, "Hey, make sure you get over to this side." And just as he's saying that, my truck, boom, it not even warning, sinks down to, and this is the 3-inch lift, and it's already this far off the ground. You couldn't open up Carlos's door, and mud's starting to ooze in, and I'm thinking, what in the world are we going to do? Because we need this truck to start our trip south for the month long. And I look at him, I'm like, "Carlos, what are we going to do?" He goes, "Don't worry about it. I'll make some phone calls." And so there we sat. In my mind, I'm worrying, and what are we going to do? Are we going to miss the flight? And I just kept hearing the mud and stuff Google and gurgle into the door. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how quickly this happened. And sure enough, in comes not in, but about an hour later, we see headlights coming down the road, and the headlights turns out to be another Suburban and a backhoe. And between the both of them together, you could feel them trying to work on that big truck of mine that was like a suction cup into that quicksand, if you will. And they eventually got us out. And I go, Carlos, I'm sorry, dude, I can't make a step foot on your property ever again. He laughed about it. We still could joke about that story about when I thought for sure the truck was going to go and sink in and disappear forever into the quicksand of our little town of Port Bernier. You say, Diego, why are you telling this story? Well, what America did in Vietnam is kind of a direct correlation to what the Cold War experience was like. America thought that our role should be an elevated one, especially after Korea, and especially after Russia keeps expanding into the Southeast Asia. And so with President Eisenhower, he kind of says, you know, Vietnam, if they fall, how many other Southeast Asian countries will make suit? And so here Vietnam was in the middle of a civil war. And America feels that it's our duty and obligation to step foot into this type of war and get involved. What was the direct result? America's role was seen as bad form. We responded horribly, and all we did is get stuck in a quagmire of deeper and deeper goo that kept America sinking and sinking further into this thing. Well, ultimately, we never did get the vehicle out. The vehicle probably just went upside down, whoop, and sunk there forever, hoping, many of the historians hoping that this Vietnam experience would be forever lost. So with that, we need to recognize that there's some things to consider as we go into this Vietnam study. First of all, why did America feel the need to get involved? Second of all, why did President Johnson escalate the war even though he said we wouldn't? How did America get out of the Vietnam War and lose the public trust? And then how did Nixon's policy kind of approach the other nations, and how did this cause many Americans to begin distrusting America during this time? Well, Korean War comes to an end. And as I said earlier, America's concerned about the spread of communism. And so President Eisenhower, who was a general in the World War II and in a major general in bringing the Korean War to an end, he is elected president. And so I'm going to talk more about him in subsequent lectures, but we need to recognize that you would think as a military man, he's going to move as a military president. And that he does. And so they're in this little off-beaten country, at least to most Americans. Okay, I'm going to show you a little picture here. You can see the world map here at the upper left-hand corner. Okay, most Americans have never even heard of Laos and Thailand and Vietnam or Burma. Yeah, they knew of China. They didn't know these other regions. And now all of a sudden, America under Eisenhower's leadership in Congress is like all of a sudden concerned about this civil war between North and South Vietnam. Well, why would they be that concerned about that? Well, there was this man named Ho Chi Minh who was a communist. Now, interesting and ironically enough, this Ho Chi Minh wasn't fighting against Americans. He was fighting against French colonials who had been, owning the region for, hundreds of years. And what he had done after he'd finally defeated these French at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, the U.S., Soviet Union, and China agreed that, you know what, maybe to keep Vietnam and keep peace going on there, that we need to find ways to hold free elections to unite the country. Interestingly enough, Ho Chi Minh agrees to this. And then Ho Chi Minh actually went and took the United States Declaration of Independence, not the Communist Manifesto, and he fashioned their Declaration of Independence much after the American. Now, you would think that would mean that America would be behind Ho Chi Minh and other declarations. Well, interestingly enough, we don't. And I'll talk about that here in a moment. But Eisenhower believed that once, Vietnam fell, it wasn't long before a row of dominoes would take effect. So here's a picture of America on the left-hand side. And, we wonder if then the Viet Cong, which is representing Ho Chi Minh, if Vietnam fell, then Laos and Cambodia and Thailand, Burma, India, and Bangladesh. And this was a deep, deep concern for Eisenhower during this time. And so interestingly enough, Eisenhower goes against our ally in NATO, the French. Why? Because there was a guy, this unknown kind of wealthy guy named Dien Diem, who said he'd be willing to lead South Vietnam. He's a military commander, and he is anti-communist, but at the same time he's anti-French, which is supposed to be our friends and allies. At the same time, because of this declaration, Ho Chi Minh ups his efforts to declare that the Viet Cong, as they're known by Americans, to fight against this Diem who is taking away the rights of his farmers and his farm people. Well, the result of this is interesting. Eisenhower gets elected out of office. Kennedy wins, and he still continues this idea that the domino theory that Eisenhower and Truman had talked about would continue. What does Kennedy do? He sends in over 10,000 American soldiers, not as soldiers, but as advisors, if you will, to train up the South Vietnamese military. Kennedy spent over $1 billion to help develop their military. What did Diem do? He used that dollars to create his own personal military, so that way he can suppress whomever he wants and become a dictator. At the same time, he suppressed that money that was supposed to be used to help the farmers of North Vietnam and the South Vietnam to find a way to compromise and create peace. No, he used it for his own personal gain. To make matters even worse, Diem, a Catholic, prohibits the Buddhists from holding their religious ceremonies and celebrations, and as a result, a horrific experience where these Buddhist monks, on the left you can see they're pouring gasoline on one of them. In the middle, he's lit a flame, and on the right there you see his charred body. This was all captured by media. What did this do? It swayed definitely America's opinion of why, and first of all, are we involved with Vietnam? And when we don't even understand who are Buddhists, why would they be willing to light themselves on fire over a religious practice like this? And the second, who's Diem? And why is America supporting him? Well, Kennedy, feeling like Diem had moved too far, orchestrated where our CIA came in and had him assassinated. And this assassination then created a vacuum where soon military leaders that were under Diem tried to position themselves for power. And then ironically and rather unfortunately, what we need to point out is less than 3 weeks later, President Kennedy himself is assassinated. Is there a link? Is this a random set of events? Is the CIA at the midst of all of this? Ooh, boy, howdy. All of that stuff is a definite possibility. Well, at the regrettable death and assassination of Kennedy, his vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, takes over. Now, Lyndon Baines Johnson is a lifelong politician. Warm to my heart because he started as a teacher and then got into public service and then eventually found himself actually being the leader of the Senate. And this guy is still known for being able to shake and bake and make deals behind the back doors to get the political scene working for them. Johnson had strong reservations. He had made in speeches as the new president that fighting in Vietnam was wrong, but in private. But in public, he appeared that we don't want America to be seen as soft on communism. So within the first 7 or 8 months, he lets the nation grieve. He kind of keeps quiet about the Vietnam experience. The 10,000 advisors that are there, they continue kind of doing their thing. But it is there that in August of '64, the perfect chance for him to strike is available. 2 little gunboats and 1 little destroyer allegedly are struck by these Vietnamese gunboats. Allegedly. It could have been a setup by our very own CIA just to give us the opportunity for us to say military men were assaulted. What was the result of this? Johnson goes before Congress, declares the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Many of the congressmen are like, what's the Gulf of Tonkin and where is it? The president says, just trust me, there was a skirmish there. They then give him the right to essentially make decisions at any time where American president wants to go. And so here's a little funny comedy about an original cartoon that was submitted. Bad news, sir. We've just found out that there's no such place as Gulf of Tonkin. And there's Johnson like, well, I got what I wanted anyway. And so this is a thing, I won't talk about it now, but we will during our Steger Select. So President Johnson, now with the ability and the permission from Congress to escalate the war, begins this action called Operation Rolling Thunder. And we go from 10,000 advisors to 58,000, then from 58 to 100,000. And soon we'll even eventually get to Nixon when we're over 500,000 soldiers over there, who many of them often don't even know why they're fighting or what they're fighting for, just because of the gross guerrilla nature of what it was. In this Operation Rolling Thunder, America spent the next 3 years dropping more munitions than we did, I believe, on World War II and Korea combined on this little nation of Vietnam. Now, what is interesting is, what are we bombing? Jungles. Vietnam doesn't have some major industrial complexes like other industrialized countries did, where you have factories outputting tanks and machines and planes. We were just like bombing these random villages and random areas where we thought there were alleged enemies. This escalation was caused because America's idea was war of attrition. The more we keep pounding them, soon they will begin fading away, backing out, and they can't kind of keep up the stamina with this. And so it is here that even America, which here we are trying to turn the tides of people towards receiving, democracy and American capitalism is good. What do? We begin using napalm bombs and Agent Orange. Napalm bombs is basically gas put into form of a gel that we then drop, and it scatters over everything. And then we use Agent Orange, which is a chemical that is actually burns away all the vegetation in the area. Why is the hope of that? Well, napalm bombs is to root out the people through burning them, and then Agent Orange is to get rid of all the cover of the force that the Viet Cong were using to transport goods in the middle of the night or during the day, hidden underneath the canopy before. This was a guerrilla war, and America was not prepared for what a guerrilla war was looking like. So here you see, Americans and their troops with their big onslaught of big Huey helicopters, and there they are going into the jungle with kind of these men who have bow and arrows theoretically that are losing, that are actually defeating the Americans through guerrilla warfare. Here's probably one of the most historic photos of America's use of napalm on these random villages that were alleged conspirators of the Viet Cong. And this poor girl, there she is running with napalm on her, running, and you can see in the left-hand corner, soldiers are trying to look at her skin has already begun peeling away from that. Now this gal, her name is Kim, you can see her right-hand shoulder there of what the napalm results were, and her whole life has been spent trying to get surgery after surgery after surgery of that. And I think this is a great quote of Kim Phuc, who actually in 98 became the Goodwill Ambassador for I think UNESCO, and just incredible posture that she says. And I love this quote there. It says, "We're all walking on fire, road, or another, be it paved by relational upheaval or financial upheaval, physical or emotional or general inconveniences of life." I love that we all encounter hardship. She goes, but when you and I come along with a posture of peace, or with gentle or kind words, or with an offer of prayer or a hug, or with anything that looks and acts like Jesus, it is as if we have used a fire extinguisher. The flames that burned hot settle down. Here's a woman that should have every reason to note why she should be unhappy with the circumstances and the pain of her life, but she opts to find ways and a path towards peace. Well, as time continues going on, America continues to try and send in soldiers that have been drafted, that have been conscripted without their own choice, and this is also another reason why many Americans have animosity towards it. It ends up the Americans, public opinion is that Vietnam was a lost cause. But the second thing is that they didn't let people join on their own terms. And so this forced conscription brought in a lot of people who were unhappy and unwilling to serve. Then the Tet Offensive takes place. And I'm not going to go into great detail on that because you'll read about it, but you need to recognize that this is like the New Year's Eve for the Buddhist nation. And it is here that this surprise attack really caused the U.S. forces to move backward. And so here, look at what they did along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They were ready, and along the entire red line right here on the left-hand side, boom, boom, whoops, I moved that a little too far. Along this trail, you can see the different attack points all at one time that they did to the Americans, who were unprepared and ready for such an attack. Here they thought the war was winding down. What did this Tet Offensive kind of teach us? Is that no, they were ramping up and they were ready for more. What did this battle do? It became the turning point for public sentiment of this war, that we weren't gaining. In fact, they were gaining more. And then in 68, towards the late part of 68, American soldiers, frustrated that they didn't know when they went into villages by day who were friend or foe. Different women by day could be nice and selling them fish, and by night could be setting traps to blow up soldiers. Okay, there were several hundred unarmed Vietnamese in a town called My Lai who were massacred by American soldiers. And for a while this was covered up by our own military, but it was uncovered. And sadly, after countless hours of interviews, 30 plus men who were there, including high-ranking captains and majors, only one person was found guilty of slaughtering and massacring these people. Why did soldiers feel the need to do that? I don't know. Maybe because this guerrilla warfare was really showing that we were losing and we were defeated, and that we didn't know who was the enemy and who was our friend in this. By 68, Johnson calls for peace negotiation and announced at the same time he would not run for president. Here is a capture of a family leaving their town of My Lai and doing whatever it would take to get away. Look how young these children are, and these women who are trying to escape while their husbands are probably up there trying to defend and make sure that the Americans don't find them. Thank goodness that we had the Associated Press that was... Well, sorry about that little glitch there. My computer can't seem to keep up with all the data that it was recording. But point number 3, we had, to kind of quick review, we had Eisenhower, then we had President Kennedy, then we had Johnson, and now we have Richard Nixon. All these presidents trying to deal with this Cold War, deal with this Korea to Vietnam, and what was this going to turn out to be? Well, President Johnson recognized that if he continued to stay in, he might use all of his political capital, and he recognized this war was not going to come to a close, and so he willingly says, I'm bowing out. And this left the door open to where Richard Nixon went on to win the election in 1968 on a promise that said he will bring an honorable end to the war in Vietnam. And so he and his Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who is actually quite a famous broker of peace behind doors, and brokered peace deals in Israel, peace deals with Russia, peace deals here with Vietnam, was doing this concept of Vietnamization. And the idea of Vietnamization is basically, we're rolling out, we're gone, peace out. Okay, it's like what happens when you're at a high school party and there's let's say 50 or 60 kids there, your peer group, and all of a sudden the cops show up. It's amazing how quickly people will find the back door, windows and everything else, so that way no one gets in trouble by the police force. Same idea here is that America was going to quickly skulk away and just basically leave the country abandoned with only the Vietnamese, the soldiers to fight the communists that were there. And what is interesting, however, is that as we were trying to de-escalate Vietnam, at the same time, let me return to the map, the adjacent countries, Cambodia, Laos, were considered neutral. But in that neutral territory, the soldiers of Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Cong were using existing trade routes, if you will, to transport their weapons and their soldiers through theoretically a neutral country, Cambodia. Well, what Nixon does is he basically widens the conflict and says, because of what Cambodia has been doing, Nixon orders an invasion of Cambodia. Even though that is completely breaking any sort of treaties or any sort of rationale, not even going before Congress to do this. He just wants to destroy the enemy bases and to pressure the Vietnamese to accept the peace terms. While at the same time, he helps the South Vietnamese invade Laos, all in this idea to bring back a closure to this war. This, in essence, created this credibility gap for America. Wait a minute, we want to leave Vietnam, but at the same time, now we're escalating issues in Cambodia and Laos. This doesn't bode too well, as we'll see here momentarily. So yes, an agreement is made that U.S. will remove, all their troops, leaving in their place the South Vietnamese to fend for themselves. North Vietnam would return captured U.S. soldiers, which was important to the Americans, and they would accept a peaceful national unification. However, what this did not mean is that the Northern Vietnamese with Ho Chi Minh were going to lay low. And with the departure of America, Saigon, the capital of the South, eventually fell. And here you see a picture of many of these South Vietnamese at this point, supporters of Americans who thought would be there to the very end, defending them, abandoning ship, and they all know that unless they get over this wall, unless they get on that helicopter to get them out of there, they are basically going to be captured and probably summarily killed by the North Vietnamese. Well, during this escalation in Laos and Cambodia, we have something going on the home front that really draws the attention of the national media. College students are saying, wait a minute, we're frustrated with the government's role from Eisenhower to then Kennedy, then to Johnson, now to Nixon. All of them saying we're de-escalating, we're not being involved, we're not going to, keep sending in soldiers. But at the same time, they were doing these things behind closed doors, escalating them. And so finally, many students across the American campuses, from Berkeley to Kent State here, began to challenge and question America's role as the agents of liberty. And it is there that we see these anti-war demonstrators converging, and sadly, in 13 seconds, 67 shots, 4 dead, 9 wounded. Now you need to recognize that Kent State wasn't about Vietnam. It was more about what was happening in Cambodia and Laos. But it is ultimately stating this is an indictment against America and our public policies of fighting communism, to what extent and to what reasons and to what rationale. So in short, over 70% of the people believe that Vietnam was a complete mistake and egregious on our part to be involved with such matters that they have there. Soon right after this, as the public sentiment continued to kind of build against Nixon and build against his cabinet, and for reasons why we were in Laos and Cambodia, out comes in the New York Times and the Washington Post these things called the Pentagon Papers that revealed that Kennedy and Johnson actually, at one hand, were saying we're de-escalating to the American people, while at the same time they were increasing number of soldiers and involvement going on, in fact, with a tune of $1 billion being sent, as I talked about earlier, to Diem there as part of the thing. Well, Congress then moves in. They repeal the Gulf of Tonkin resolution given to Johnson, and then they pass the War Powers Act in 1973 to curb the executive powers, where the president can deploy troops, but within 48 hours he has to get permission from Congress to declare war. And here I love this political cartoon to bring about a summary of this, is the military to the presidents, the legislative branch and the executive branches and the military branches were earnestly working hard to keep the truth about Vietnam whitewashed for the media and most of the Americans kind of in display. And what did this create? It created a gap of credibility that still to this day, frankly, exists between many Americans and our current government. So in short, remember, this was about a civil war between two nations, and America gets involved, and soon this became a quicksand that we couldn't get ourselves out of. And the more we threw at them, the more the Vietnamese and the Viet Cong fought back with this guerrilla type warfare, to where ultimately America pulls out and kind of leaves a big boondoggle of a mess there at the end of this crisis that we had. So with that, Golden Bears, keep it classy. We'll be seeing you next time.